Hello and welcome to Keep It Fictional, a book lovers podcast from the Port Moody Public Library. My name is Sadie, and I will be your host today. And today I am joined by my book friends Virginia and Kareen. Now, if you are a regular listener to our podcast, then you have probably become familiar with our most anticipated episodes. We do these episodes a few times a year, and we all love them, or at least I love them, because it gives us a chance to look ahead into the upcoming months and see all the wonderful and exciting new books that are going to be published. And it also means that maybe we get a bit of a break from rushing to finish a book for that week's episode, which is just an added bonus. Now, it's always a struggle for us to pick just 5 books to talk about. And again, if you are a regular listener, you probably know that we are all quite adept at sneaking in some extra picks throughout the episode. Now, given our extreme, no, never, not us, we would never. Now, given our extreme excitement to read these upcoming books, you probably think that as soon as the book is released and we can get our hands on it, we rush out to grab it, we sit down, and we immediately read it cover to cover. While I would love to say that that is the case, at least for me, it is definitely not. It has led us to ask the question, how many of our most anticipated books do we actually end up reading? I'll let my book friends think about that one for a little bit. So for today's episode, I have chosen to hold myself and my book friends accountable just a tiny bit. And we are going to be revisiting just one book from any of our most anticipated lists that we have actually. Yeah, think about that. So I did, I'm going to go first, and I did have a few books to choose for this episode, but for some reason, I decided to go with the most complicated one to describe because that sounded like a fun thing to do. So this book was featured on our most anticipated spring 2023 list, and I remember reading the description, and it mentioned books and libraries and magic and mystery. Now, this sounds like, I mean, there's 4 things, so it's not the trifecta, but the perfect mixture of things for me, and I was immediately drawn in. But I have to say that it was not exactly as I expected. So this is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence. Our story is a split one. We begin with Lavira. She's 10 years old. She has lived out in the dust her whole life. Abandoned by the rest of the world, the dust is riddled with dangers, including dust worms who lie in wait to gobble you down if you get too close, and the attacking Sabas, a race of wolf-like warriors who have been working their way across the dust, getting ever closer to the main city of Krath. When her village is attacked by the Sabers, I'm going to start that again. When her village is attacked by the Sabers and her aunt, along with the rest of the adults, is killed, Lavira and all the surviving children are dragged out into the dust after them. Now, terrified as she is, Lavira has also always been a very, very curious child, and so she can't help but be fascinated by her captors. But before she can learn too much about them, Lavira and the rest of the children are rescued by a group of soldiers from Krath City and brought within its walls to start a new life. Krath City is nothing like Lavira imagined. Now, it's a city where the king lives, and it's a city where people who have such wealth that Lavira cannot even comprehend it live. And it is also the home to the library, the house of every last bit of knowledge in the entire world, having been collected for centuries, a building and an organization that has been around seemingly forever. Now, with the help of one of the soldiers, Malar, and just a little bit of influence from a very eccentric librarian named Ute, Lavira somehow miraculously finds herself saved from a fate of working in the sewers. And brought into the library itself, studying to become a librarian, an accomplishment that takes years to achieve and one that is far more dangerous and mysterious than Levira ever thought possible. In the depths of the library, in a room filled with huge piles of teetering books, Ivar Eventari and his 4 siblings have lived for the last decade. They have never seen the outside world, but they know it must exist. They also know that the doors that refuse to open for them must lead to it. The 5 of them are all that is left of their people, the rest having been massacred by the Sabbaths decades ago. But for Ivar, Clovis, Starvel, Carol, and Maynard, the library was their salvation. Each of them, at different points in time, got trapped inside a mechanism or a device called the mechanism. Now, this device allows you to live in the world of any book that you bring into it. And for no reason at all, when each of the 5 siblings entered decades apart from each other, the mechanism did not let them leave. They did not age while they were in the mechanism, and each of them became an expert on whatever topic of book they had taken in with them. Each except for Ivar, who has no memory of what book he brought in or the decades that he spent inside. One day, the mechanism decided to release all 5 of the siblings at once, and now they have been stuck living in the library ever since, cared for by 2 android-like beings known only as the assistant and the soldier. One day, while trying not to be killed by an escape, which is a being of dark energy that the mechanism sometimes releases into the library, Ivar finds a strange handwritten book. He opens the cover and he's surprised to find that the first page has only 1 line on it, and it's addressed to him. Ivar, find me at the bottom. Now, the only bottom that he can think of is the bottom of the huge well that they use to water their crops and get drinking water from. So without putting too much thought into it, Ivar dives into the well. He awakes in a strange world surrounded by many different shimmering pools. And it is here that he first stumbles upon Levira. 12 years old now and studying to be a librarian, Levira and her classmates have been sent on an impossible task. Retrieve 1 individual book from the depths of the library and bring it back in 2 days. Now, the library itself is huge. No one has ever seen the extent of it. No one person has ever been to every chamber inside of the library. Most of the chambers you're not even allowed to go inside of. They're forbidden, and unless you know how to access them, there is no way in or out. Now, if Levira and her friends do not succeed, Levira is going to be kicked out of the library for good. Because over the last 2 years, she has managed to find a place for herself and a group of friends who she can rely on. However, she has also made enemies. Enemies who, based only on the fact that she comes from the dust, have decided that she has no right to live and study among them. Powerful enemies who have the king's ear and will stop at nothing to get Levira kicked out of the library. So when Levira and Ivar meet, to Levira, Ivar is fascinating. He's about 8 years older than her and very, very, very tall. To Ivar, Levira is the first person not from his makeshift family that he has seen in decades, and she won't stop asking him questions. But before they can talk too much, an escape springs out of one of the pools, causing Ivar to attack and Levira to be thrust back into her own pool, where she emerges back into her own library, miraculously, with the book she was searching for in her hand. Now that Levira has found this magical place, she spends all her time trying to figure out a way to get back to it. But it's not as easy as she thought. The secret portal that she had found was hidden in a forbidden chamber that she was only able to access with the help of a rogue crow-like library guide. And while she can find books on this magical place, the Exchange, she learns it's called, she can't figure out how to return to it. Ivar, on the other hand, has yet to leave the Exchange, deciding instead to explore all of the different pools. They each bring him to the library, but not his library. And in all of them, he is invisible to everyone that he sees. He soon figures out that each pool will take him to a different time in the library's history. He keeps searching, hoping to find whoever wrote the handwritten message in the book and hoping to maybe see Levira again. When Levira does appear again, he hardly recognizes her. She seemed to have aged years, even though it's only been a matter of hours for him. And the only way he knows her is by her incessant question asking. As Ivar and Levira learn more about each other and more about their own libraries, they start to realize that the library they each come from is in fact the same, only at very different times. Each time Levira returns to her own time, she ages and learns more about the corrupt king and the government of Krath City, more about how the library was first formed and why it has continued to change as it has, not always for the better, and more about the impending war on the city itself and the library by the approaching Saba army. Now, she has continued to be fascinated by the Sabas, even though she knows she will always hate them for what they did to her village. But she's studied them. She studied not just more about their culture, but has started to learn their language as well. Each pool that Ivar visits tells him more about the wars that have taken place and how he and his siblings, and even Levira, might be involved. Levira and Ivar start to realize that they may be involved in something that is much, much bigger than they are. And when they both make a horrible, shocking discovery about the other, they will have to decide who they can trust and if what they have been told their entire lives is true, or if it has all just been a centuries-old lie. This book is very complicated, to say the least. I've given a rather involved synopsis and have definitely left out most of the characters and entire storylines. The world that Lawrence created so it's hinted at being a very, very distant future of ours, but it doesn't ever really say this outright. It just kind of hints at like the time when we explored the skies and kind of there's other hints that suggest that this is a part of our world, but very, very far in the future. Underneath the main storyline, the book does deal with quite heavy themes, including prejudice, genocide, the distribution of knowledge, and very extreme bias. And it asks the question, who is an enemy? And are they only seen as an enemy because someone more powerful than us has told us that they are? This book definitely took me a bit to get into. I would say the first half is rather slow. We get introduced to the world, to the characters. It's quite a long book. It's about 560 pages. So if you're not a fan of chunky books, this is probably not the one for you. I listened to the audiobook, which is narrated by Jessica Fletcher. And I think that for me, that was a good choice, as I don't know if I would have been motivated to keep reading if I was reading the physical book, which is a big shock for me because I don't often put books down. But it did the beginning of it, the first half moved very, very slowly. But I think that once the action picked up, it definitely, you get into it, you get quite involved in the characters and quite invested in their stories and in their lives. I really enjoyed the characters of Levira and Ivar, who definitely are our two protagonists. The story revolves around the two of them. And so I've mentioned them, but there's a lot of side characters that come into it and have quite important roles that I just did not have time for. And I did find myself rooting for both of them throughout the story. There's enough of a mystery aspect to the book that you kind of find yourself trying to figure out the whole thing before Ivar and Levira do. There are definitely some really big reveals that I did not see coming. And I was really quite proud of the one big reveal that I guessed right from the beginning. So you can play along and see if you can figure it out. I think that Lawrence left a lot unknown at the end of the book, so I'm looking forward to the sequel. The book that broke the world just came out on April 9th. I think it's supposed to be a trilogy. So I will probably try and pick up the audiobook of that one as well, because I think it's another big one. So I will probably do the audiobook of that. But I'm excited to see kind of where he takes the story. There, as I said, there was quite a big reveal at the end. And he kind of opened things up and left a lot of questions open for what's going to happen next. So I would say, yeah, if you are a fan of epic fantasy, but with a bit more serious and timely themes to it, and also if you like a book that is about books, because this book is definitely very, very much about books and libraries, then I think that this would be a really good read. This is The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence.
Sadie, did you say the audiobook narrator was Jessica Fletcher?
Jessica Fletcher.
Not as played by Angela Lansbury in the seminal
I don't
television
think
show Murder,
so.
She Wrote.
No. I'm guessing probably not. Maybe a fan of that named their child Jessica Fletcher.
Oh gosh, we should be so lucky.
Or maybe that is like her narrator name. Maybe she, as like a stage name, she chose.
I mean, if she wanted to be really sneaky about it, of course she would go with Jessica Fletcher's pen name, J.B. Fletcher, the great mystery author.
I wonder if that's copyrighted though.
I mean, we're asking a lot of questions of someone whose name is probably like legitimately Jessica Fletcher.
It's true. I mean, it does happen. It does definitely happen.
Is this your real name? What's your real name?
Show me your ID. What's your passport? Yeah. So if anyone would like to look into that a bit more for us and let us know, that would be wonderful. All right. Next, we're going to go over to Virginia. Virginia, which most anticipated book that you have actually read are you going to be talking about today?
Well, I think many of you know that I actually read these books prior to the most anticipated episodes. Most of the time, I like to read them first. And then again, thanks to all the publishers who provide those advanced copies. So I do tend to read them before I do these episodes. So I actually have read most of my books, but the ones that like actually legitimately reading it for this episode, I find when I went back, I had to go back to fall 2022. And I remember why I did not read this book ahead of time. It was because I was ordering books the day before our recording, and I found this book. I just discover it, and I'm like, I need to read this now. At least I need to like talk about this now. And so I swapped out one of the titles that day, and that is why I haven't read it yet. And just like Sadie said in the intro, despite how excited I was to read this book, did I read it? No, I bought it and then just sort of didn't read it. But then I get to read it this week. So the book that I chose is called HellSans, and it is by Ever Dundas. And the reason why I was so excited about this book is because I'm that weird person who likes fonts, who likes typefaces. In fact, one of my favorite nonfiction read, maybe my only nonfiction read, is called Just My Type by Simon Garfield. And it's all about the stories behind all the different fonts that you use every single day. And it is like the most exciting book for me. So when I found out that there was a novel about a font, about a typeface, and not just any typeface, but an evil typeface, I just need to get my hands on it. But didn't read it until now. So thanks, Sadie. So HellSans, let me just tell you a little bit about the world first before I tell you about the story. HellSans, as I said, is a font. So all the official messaging in the city is done in this font. And I don't know if it is aesthetically pleasing or not, but it's not really chosen for that. It's chosen because it makes people happy. When you look at the fonts, when you read things that are said in this font, you just feel this calmness, you feel this joy that is just like, flowing in your veins. And they what they call you feel bliss. Unfortunately, not everyone does. There is a portion of the population that don't feel this at all. In fact, when they read things that are said in this font, they start scratching. They start scratching, they get itchy. their nose start bleeding, teeth start falling out, and they get nauseous and they throw up and they throw up some more. They basically have a severe allergy to this font. And these people, they call them the city calls them HSA, HellSans allergic. And when you are discovered to be allergic, then you get reported and then you'll be told to get out of the city, go live in one of those isolated communities that is especially for HSAs. And you just have to fend for yourself. You have to leave everything behind and you're never allowed back. And so with the treatment of HSA, it kind of like raises a lot of like different political opinions about it. And a lot of like political platforms kind of run on how you should deal with HSAs. The current party in power, Prime Minister Caddick, and his party believes that HSA are not of sound mind. They have lost, like they're not well. They shouldn't be allowed in society. And in fact, we should strip them of more and more rights that they should have as a human being. And then the opposition is basically running on a platform that, no, we need to find a cure for HSA. Of course, like the media would say, oh, you're just trying to get votes. That's why you are trying to look for a cure. But like that's the two kind of main feelings about HSAs. What about HSAs themselves? What do they think? Well, some of them, yeah, sure, they would like a cure because like this allergy is not fun at all. But there's also another group. They call themselves the seraphs, like the angels, and they believe that it's actually a very simple solution. Just don't use the font. Just use another font. Then nobody's gonna get allergic to it. Nobody's gonna feel anything like any sickness or anything from it. But of course, nobody really wants to do that because everybody else look at that font and they feel so happy. Why would you want to give up happiness? So there is not a lot of support for these seraphs. And of course, then they're also being labeled as terrorists because they will come and vandalize signs that are written in HellSans. And of course, if you know fonts, you know that HellSans, sans means without. So it's like it doesn't have serif. It's a sans serif font, which means it doesn't have those little legs or those little lines that attach to the end of the characters. And of course, the group of terrorists are called the serifs. So what they do, they go to they go to those signs and they just add little feet to all the letters so that when you look at it, you don't feel sick anymore. Anyway, I just thought that was a really cute name. So that's kind of what they do. So that is sort of the world that we find our characters, Icho and Jane. And the book is set up in a way that you have part one is Icho's story, part two is Jane's story, and then part three, we alternate between the two point of views. And you can read, it tells you to read either part one or part two first. It's completely up to you. So you can do it whichever order. So I actually did part two first. I read Jane's story first. Jane Ward is one of the most powerful people in the city. In fact, she is basically known as the company. She's the company because she makes robots. And yes, instead of in addition to like evil fonts, there's also robots. These are basically like personal AI assistants that everybody gets, and they help you monitor your like health, monitor your vitals, make sure you're doing okay. They remind you to do things, they're like your helpful assistants. They also are connected to your brain so that they can like, you can communicate with them telepathically, basically. And they know everything that you're thinking, and they just help you, as the slogan of the company said, helping you be the best you. And you can kind of think of them, they're like about like, kind of sort, they kind of sit on your shoulder. You kind of like almost like in a fantasy book that like you're familiar kind of thing. So this is like, but they're robots. And everybody has one. And and Jane, company makes them. The only company that makes them, and so she makes her super powerful. She's also an ally of the Prime Minister Caddick. So of course, the two of them, like the two most powerful people pretty much just control everything, and they support one another. So that means, whatever the Prime Minister platform is running on, like, Jane is there to support them. And one day they had this big giant gala, and she met Icho, the other main character, for the first time. Now they know of each other. They don't know each other, but they know of each other. Jane knows that Icho is a scientist working for the Prime Minister Caddick, and that's why she knows everything about what she does. And Icho has always admired Jane because Jane is this, like before she was the business person, she was a scientist herself, and she was super accomplished. She was the one who like created all these personal assistants. So she's got a lot of admiration for them. And when the two first met, they were instantly attracted to each other. And after talking for a while, Jane invited Icho to meet up for dinner in a few days. But this dinner never happened because the lives of Jane and Icho are about to change overnight. Jane went home that night to her apartment, her giant apartment, thinking about Icho. She was holding a glass of wine, staring out in the window, and across the building, she saw two men struggling and fighting with each other. And it looks like they're trying to kill each other or something. And so when she got her little robot assistant to take a closer look, she realized that one of the men is Mulligan, the leader of the opposition party, and he is about to get killed. So she asked the robot to call the police immediately, and she tried to keep an eye on what's happening. But the two men keep like coming into view and then disappearing from the window. And suddenly just only one of them came back. The other guy, the killer. And he looked right at her and he made a gesture to let her know that he sees her and he's coming after her. Jane immediately ran out of the building and she doesn't know where to go, and she's trying to like go to the back door so that like she can escape somehow. And she realized that she does not have her robot assistant with her. And as she was running and she's running, suddenly she collapsed because she feels like someone is ripping her heart out. She can just feel it, but nobody is there. And then she realized that what she's feeling is her robot assistant. And because of the way they design them, there's actually like a beating heart in them in the later models. And of course, she has the latest model. And so someone is destroying her robot and she can feel every single thing, even though she's not supposed to. They're connected, but they're not connected that way. But she could feel everything. She could see it. And eventually she got to the scene and she find her assistant completely destroyed. Feeling really sick from this, she took a day off and she thought, oh, I need to just like, regroup and try to forget about everything. And so she was like, oh, I'm going to stare at these like posters in my house that are in HellSans. I'm just going to feel better. But when she looked at the words, she starts scratching and scratching and her skin starts breaking and she starts feeling nauseous. She starts getting sick. And she realized she got HSA and she's not sure where this come from. Ever Dundas has written this really gripping, action-packed page turner. There's like things happening all the time, and you're gonna fly through this book, even though it's a fairly long book also, but it does not feel like that at all. And as you are like just trying to figure out what's happening to Jane, what's happening to Icho, you're also exploring some bigger kind of societal issues, not just about how we treat people with disabilities, but also how the society is set up to start with that only favor one group and one group only. Sure, we will help, sure, we will support people with disabilities until you're asking for something that will inconvenience me, until you're asking for something that will take away my comfort. Then I don't know. I'm not really sure whether I want to help anymore. And Ever Dundas really like did not shy away from sort of that brutality and the horror that she's depicting. And it's a really like provides a really thought-provoking way of looking at sort of all the issues and how like that, there is just the way like our world is set up is not friendly to many people. But this plot-driven book is not just plot because it also has very complex characterization. The relationship between Icho and Jane is complicated, despite their initial kind of like infatuation. Like it's a very rocky relationship. They find themselves getting caught up in this bigger action, but there's also a lot of disagreement between the two of them about where they think the world should go. And I think it's interesting to provide sort of that two different ways kind of that you can read, two different orders you can read this book, because I think if you read like I read the Jane chapter first before I go back to the Icho chapter. I think if you read the other way around, you might get a different perspectives, and it might even, I feel like, bias you towards how you view the story. So I find that really, really interesting. Kind of echoing back onto like how we are brought up, how all the things that we have been so ingrained in us and in the system that we don't even realize it. So there's lots and lots of layers in this relationship. But it's definitely a thriller. There's going to be some body horror, as you can imagine, about sort of like what this font does to people, and there's a little bit of like cyberpunk involved with the robots. So there's just a little bit of, I think, of everything for everyone. So if you are interested in a queer story, if you're interested in a story that explores sort of people with disability, and what the society, how we can maybe build a better place for people that need something different. This is the book that, the novel that you can check out, and it's about a font, most importantly. So this is HellSans by Ever Dundas.
Wonderful. Thank you, Virginia. It's a little terrifying that a font could be that powerful.
Okay, but like Windings, like it does elicit a physical response.
Comic Sans? You mean Comic Sans?
Mm,
Right? You get sick
it's true.
just
It's true.
saying the name.
I know.
think
And like
about it.
feeling about, is it Aptos, which is the new like standard font for
Mm.
everything? Like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. So much change.
See, I like Aptos. I like Aptos. I find myself changing fonts to Aptos if it doesn't like default to it now.
You're ready to just like throw Calibri to the curb, like it has done nothing for you.
I've never liked Calibri. I've always been more like of an Arial. I know. I know.
See, maybe this should have been our existential question of like what font really speaks to you? What font is your personality? That really Arial. Really.
No, it's like
Really.
it's chunkier. I like the chunkier version of it. Calibri is, yeah. I also went through a big Garamond phase where like everything I would do was Garamond. I've moved beyond it, and I think that's for the best. But
Do you want to hear my very worst library confession of the worst thing I have ever done in my entire life? So at my little hometown library, I had like a project to redo spine labels. And this is like early days of computers and fonts and like the dizziness of thereof. And so I was redoing spine labels of the nonfiction, which, if you're familiar with nonfiction, is numbers and letters, and usually like a slew of numbers involved. And so when I was choosing the font to replace all of these spine labels with, I did them in papyrus.
how did that go over, Crane?
No one argue with me, but it's a decision that like haunts me to this very day.
Yeah, I get that. I get that. Well, as Kareen recovers from that giant confession, I also have a confession to make. Somehow, I must have been thinking about Murder, She Wrote while I was writing my notes, and it's not Jessica Fletcher. Jessica Whittaker is the narrator of the book. Jessica Whittaker, not Fletcher. No, no. So stand down, everyone who's out there trying to find out if there is a Jessica Fletcher who actually exists. Stand down.
Or they might have just changed their name. They're just like, oh yeah, I don't want to be that. So maybe they just change it, and they just did a whole swap.
You think so? Yeah, I think it must be.
Or like an alternate universe. Like in one alternate universe, Angela Lansbury is well and living among us and reading audiobooks, which honestly sounds like a great timeline to be in.
She would be such a wonderful audiobook reader. Yeah, she would do a beautiful, beautiful job.
Honestly, I wonder if she has. Because I mean, there is the continuing Murder She Wrote book series, of which I have read some of. And so maybe she did some of those in like very, very early audiobook days.
I feel like they would have had to. I feel like that's a no-brainer in a lot of ways.
Especially because she at like later stages of the television series, and this is just going to turn into a Murder She Wrote podcast at a certain point. She became very like heavily involved in the production and like the the direction the series was taking, because they eventually moved it from Cabot Cove to New York. And then they had all of these like special television, made for television movies that were set in Ireland because that's where she lived. So yeah, maybe I again, like if Dame Angela Lansbury wanted to run like the Jessica Fletcher empire, I would gladly be a citizen.
That is fair. That is totally fair. All right, well, why don't we switch gears to our actual existential question for the day? And I feel like we've delved into a lot of existentialism. Yep, I'm committing. Um, all right, so for our existential question for today, we're going back to our most anticipated books and looking at our to be read list. And so I'm curious, book friends, how much does your to be read list actually dictate the books that you read?
Yeah, Virginia.
You mean my spreadsheet, my wonderful spreadsheet that I look at every single day? I I I used to think it doesn't, and in some ways it still doesn't. But I think what happens is that I would put all the stuff that I want in the thing, and then in the spreadsheet, and then when, especially for podcast reading, when topic comes up, I'm like, well, these are books I already wanted to read. Which one can I fit into this like topic for the day? So that's usually how I find my podcast book, is looking at books I already want to read, um, and then see if I can like sort of fit it in or rationalize it into the topic. So yeah, so I would say that. And then, but in terms of like reading for my own, depends. Usually it's just what shows up, like whether it's like a book that shows up at the library that like, well, still soon I have to read. So like usually something like that. Or like it's just like a shiny new book that I'm like, ooh, it's not on my list, but like this looks good. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So sometimes, I'm trying to like be a little bit more planning, even more with my spreadsheet. So like, this, I know, right? There's certain things I want to read this year. Like I have certain goals that I want to do. So I'm trying to like work on, see which one yeah, slowly go through those. So yeah, so I'm working on it. So yes, these days, more so than before, I think. I think if you asked me in the beginning when we first started this podcast, I'd be like, nah, what is a TBR? I don't even have one. So
I have a question about the spreadsheet because, as you know, I use a similar spreadsheet that you have shared with me at one point. So, do you put your TBR on the spreadsheet as well?
I do. I
Okay.
have so many
Okay.
tabs. So many. Hey, you talk Murder She Wrote, we can talk spreadsheet at some point. And then at some point, Korean night, I don't know what is our common topic that we'll talk about, but like, yeah. But yes, so there's like the TBR one. There's one about like the what I'm actually reading. So I'm tracking that. There's all my graphs on one of them. And then there's like, yeah, oh yeah, put charts and graphs, of course. Like, and then there's the ones that I track, the ones that the goals that I want to do. Like, so like I have a whole list of Japanese, like, books in translation. There's that one there, and there's other ones that I'm not gonna say anymore because Korean is going to like faint from this. No, that's
No,
good.
I
Yeah.
said go for
No,
it. I've
your
got
job
stuff
is
I
to
can
figure
do
out
here. I can
what you
reply to
and
some
I can
emails.
talk
It's fine.
about that Sadie doesn't care about. I don't know what that is. So yeah.
Okay, that's good to know. That is because yeah, I use like the main tracker that I think you sent me that has like the ones that currently reading and all the different categories to keep track of. Yeah, like if it's a BIPOC book, it's LGBTQ, like all of those kind of things. When how long it took you to read that kind of stuff. So I definitely use that and I love it. But yeah, maybe I will have to add further tabs to mine
But
as
that helps
well.
me, like I said, like figure out books to read for this one. And also, like I have one that like keeps track of all the books that I buy. So then I'm like, look at how many books you're buying, and have you actually read them yet? Like, so I have to like count, like, did I read these or not? So like, it just kind of like hopefully give me incentive to actually read books that I buy, not just keep buying them, which is what I'm doing. I know, I do
You
that
want to
anyway.
deny yourself every pleasure in life, Virginia.
Well,
Is that the goal?
but do you not understand that the spreadsheet itself is a pleasure in life? So So I am not
No,
denying
I
myself
don't.
at all. I'm not denying myself any pleasure. In fact, I'm adding more pleasure to my life by having
I can't
a
wait to
spreadsheet.
walk away from my work spreadsheets to go to my home spreadsheet.
Yeah, but the home spreadsheet is fun. It keeps track of fun stuff.
How about you, Corinne? Do you have a TBR? Do you do you write things down?
No, no, I don't. Oh gosh. Sorry, I just need to like get all of this like anxiety out of my system vis-a-vis spreadsheeting for fun. That's a lot to like. I mean, I get like a good chart for like keeping track of, well, nothing. I have exactly one chart. It's because I have to have it. And
Well,
that's it.
I was just gonna say, what is the chart for? Are you able to tell us? It's just
It's like a half finished. Well, the problem is I start the chart and then I just kind of like forget about it. Which is kind of how I would approach a to be read pile and or spreadsheet, is that I will start off with it and then very quickly lose interest it and forget about it entirely. So to answer your question, not really. Like even on Goodreads, I've stopped. I've given up that illusion that I'm ever going to go back to that like list of books that I said I was going to read, because I'm never ever going to do it. Sometimes you just have to recognize your own limitations and work with the brain you've got. And mine is kind of like a little magpie, a little magpie. And so I gather all the little books in my den, in my little nest at my house, which is why I have a cajillion library books at home right now, which I didn't quite realize until I put them all up in a pile. And then I kind of just like take my little hands and I just kind of put my little fingers on their spine and be like, ooh, ooh. And I go just on vibes alone. I'm kind of like Liz before me. So this is legitimate if it is backed up by Liz. I'm very much a mood reader. It's like, what do I feel like today? And so kind of having a to be read list is not so useful as it is having a to be read literal pile, because I'm tactile touching these things to be like, who am I like on the same wavelength of today? And so it really is that I like hold them in my hands. I go up and down their spines like that, which means I have to buy a lot of books because I never know when's going to be the right time to read them. But this like pains me to say. I can agree with you on one thing, Virginia, in that the podcast has really like refocused me occasionally on going to books that I was interested in before, or kind of like, oh, that sounds like a really neat concept, or this is an author that I really want to explore. And so in some ways I do have that kind of mental TBR. Mostly it's my just returned at the library because I take them home, I don't read them, and then I return them. But I'm like, oh, maybe that one. And sometimes I'm literally just looking through the catalog the night before to see what goes with the theme. But the podcast has kind of helped in that sense of, like if there was something that intrigued me about a book or an author before, I'm more likely to remember it when the podcast topic kind of like redirects my attention towards it. Because I think that's the hard thing, especially working in the library, is that there's so many shiny things. There's constantly new and shiny things. So it's I think this is a really great topic, Sadie, that maybe we should do more often. Um because I remembered, oh, that's that book that I really wanted to read for that particular reason. So yeah, the podcast does help, and that's the only thing I'm going to agree with you about today, Virginia.
There's one. I mean, that's already pretty amazing that you agree with me one thing. How about you, Sadie?
I'm definitely similar to you, Virginia, where I tend to put everything kind of on my list. As you have learned, I do not use the spreadsheet yet to track my TBR, but I still do use Goodreads quite a bit, and I will put anything and everything kind of on my TBR. So books that I know that I'm going to go out and find as soon as they are published because I love the author and I know I have to read them, sequels, right down to ones that I'll, in like my research for the podcast or research for ordering, I'll come across and be like, oh, hey, that looks kind of cool. I might want to read that at some point. And those ones will often stay on the list for a very, 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 very long time. But I will find that I will go back to the list if I don't have something to read. And this doesn't happen as much right now, just because I feel like I am always kind of reading something for the podcast. Or right now, I will try, and I feel like Fiona somewhere is giving me like a yay, because I always have an audiobook going, and I always have a physical book going right now, because I can do it at the same time. I can listen to the audiobook while I'm driving. And then I can, when I'm at home before bed, I can read the physical book. And so usually one of those will be for the podcast, and one of them will just be for me. And so if I'm looking for something for the for me book, then I will go back to that list if I've kind of run out, and it doesn't happen often, but if I've run out of the ones I know I want to read, then I'll go to that and say, okay, what have I in the past? What have I wanted to read in the past? And so that way I will look back on my TBR, but it is in a lot of ways just a list of things to put on a list for the sake of having a list.
Aspirational. It's a good thing.
Yes, I like that. Aspirational. All right. Well, thank you, book friends, for weighing in on that quite contentious topic. We are going to go to Corrine now for our final pick of the most anticipated book that you have actually read.
Yeah, and I went back. I went way back. So this was on, I think, like in the very beginnings of our podcast, because of course Virginia keeps a list of every single book that we've talked about on the podcast, because of course she does. And so because of the way the spreadsheet came up on my phone, it was at the very tippity top, because I think it was like one of the first of our most anticipated conversations, because I flicked through a couple of them. One of them that I was going to read, Virginia said wasn't very good. So I was like, oh, perfect. Don't need to read that. And a couple of them I actually had read, so I do get around to them. But this one actually comes from our most anticipated summer 2021. So this has been a long time coming. And I've taken it home at least twice and just kind of looked at it and like observed it. And then I put my little hand on its spine and I was like, not yet. Like waiting for a wine to mature. But this was the time because I had to. And so I read it. And this is the reading list by Sara Nisha Adams. Again, that was on my list for a very long time. Weirdly enough, Sadie, also a book about books, also a book about libraries. So inadvertently, we did kind of go on a theme. And those two themes are things that I often do like reading books about. I love a book about like the transformative power of story, or like, oh, everyone coming together in a community library. So yeah, it was a very obvious as to why it had kind of come on my list. I think it kind of came in a glut of very similar books at the time, and that kind of idea of some sort of mysterious thing being passed around and bringing people together. Kind of like the Authenticity Project, which I did cry at. So this one is kind of on the same lines. So if you don't remember this summer of 2021 most anticipated part 1 podcast episode, this is about a widower named Mukesh, and he starts every day the same. He sleeps in late, and then he wakes up to 3 phone messages from his daughters. They're worried about what he's eating, whether he put the bins out this morning. Is he exercising? What is he doing today? And did he remember to take the bins out? Yeah, because I was talking to my other sister and she was wondering whether you put the bins out. So I'm just making sure that you put the bins out, Dad. Did you put the bins out? Are the bins out? Every day for him in Wembley Central in London is absolutely the same since his beloved wife, Naina, died. After kind of ignoring his phone messages one day, he starts to clean out the closet, taking out her beautiful saris and smelling them just to be remembered of her perfume. As he pulls them out drops a book. And not just any book, a library book. A copy of The Time Traveler's Wife, snuggled in amongst the clothes. Now, his wife was a voracious reader. She was never without a story, and it was something that Mukesh didn't really understand. She would sit in her little corner and giggle and laugh and turn the pages and be perfectly happy, but he never really had that connection with books. So to kind of learn a little bit about his wife after she passed, he picks up the book, reads it, and loves it. He is inspired by this book, but he is a little bit lost as what to do next. So he's very brave and asks for directions to his local library. He walks into the small building with the fading "Save Our Library" sign and goes to the young woman sitting at the desk and asks for a recommendation. Unfortunately, he asks Alicia, who is wasting her summer away between high school and university, where she is going to be a lawyer. Now, Alicia didn't really want this job. She doesn't really read. The only reason why she got this temporary position is because her younger brother, Aiden, worked in the library before and loved it. And everyone loves Aiden. Everyone loves Aiden. No one loves Alicia. Now, this extends even to their family situation. Aiden and Alicia, their entire lives revolve around their mother, Layla, and their mother's mental illness. She cannot be left alone. She has to be supervised by one of them or both of them. And so this summer, they are trading off taking care of her. Aiden is working night shifts. And then Alicia works during the day so that they always have someone to look after her. And this is really difficult for Alicia because everyone loves Aiden. No one loves Alicia, including her own mother. And so when this kind of unsure, hesitant old man comes to the desk and asks for a recommendation, she snaps. "Why would you ask me for a recommendation?" "Well, this is the library." "Well, I don't do that here." The old man goes off abashed, ashamed, and one of the other patrons comes up to the desk and says, "Well, this is a really good book," and holds out a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. Alicia takes the book angrily and goes to check it back into the library. As she does, out comes a little piece of paper. Curious, she opens it and it reads, "Just in case you need it, To Kill a Mockingbird, Rebecca, The Kite Runner, Life of Pi, Pride and Prejudice, Little Women, Beloved, A Suitable Boy." As a penance for her bad behavior that she's starting to feel a little bad about, she picks up To Kill a Mockingbird in the hopes that she can read it and recommend it to this older gentleman. And she loves it. She loves it so much that she sneakily puts it on hold for the older gentleman so that he has to come to the library to read it, and then she will have someone to talk to about it. This starts their own little private book club with their own special list of reading recommendations from a mysterious reader. And this reading list also starts to pop up in other people's lives in different places. People who need something else in their lives start to find this handwritten little note in the gym, in cafes, in their shoes. And their lives are transformed by the reading list just as much as Murkesh and Alicia's lives are. So this is a very sweet, very charming book about the power of a good story and the ability of libraries to bring people together. So of course, it's very much up all of our alleys, in that I think we believe this. It is very charming. It's very British in a way, like, oh, they were all like little charming people and we have snacks. So it's very light. It's very light. And, some of the characters are a little bit stronger than others. I really loved Makesh's story, especially with he's kind of dealing with the grief and loss of his wife, and then his kind of well-meaning but meddling daughters who kind of don't see him as a person so much as like a burden that they need to take care of and kind of like fix his life. Which he begins to realize when he reads Pride and Prejudice and begins to kind of cast all his daughters as the various characters in it, which I thought was very sweet. And he also is really desperately wanting to connect with his young granddaughter who had a really nice relationship with his wife and who was also a big reader. And so he kind of takes on this project to become a little bit closer to her. And I thought that was a really lovely, like intergenerational story that I really enjoyed. His parts were really, really strong. Um, kind of when you read a book from two different points of view, you often find yourself liking one more than the other. And I definitely connected with his side of the story more than I did Alicia. The book really attempts to tackle some really big mental health issues. And I would say that there is a content warning for suicide in the book. And it was more successful at some parts than others. I felt that the end when they were trying to kind of discuss the importance of mental health, um, it didn't kind of in a book that is so light, in a book that is kind of so so gentle and sweet, to kind of tackle something like talking about suicide and an attempt to kind of make it into a redemptive arc for someone just felt a little disingenuous, in terms of kind of like the tone that this book was taking, and the importance of treating a topic like that with kind of like the attention that it deserves. I just didn't think that that part was really successful, or was really dealt with in a way that felt like it was enough. So I was really surprised at the end of it that it decided to kind of go in that direction. And I just didn't think that the book needed it in that way. And so it was a little disappointing to kind of see that. Um, because I think that especially with this kind of genre of books that are talking about like the power of story and like the power of community and the power of like books to bring people together, I think that you can tackle deeper topics, but I think that you need to do it with a depth, um, and with a little bit more of a serious understanding than maybe this book did. And so I was glad that I read it, but I don't know that kind of knowing all this that I would recommend it again. Like 2021 Korean, you sweet summer babe, like you didn't know. You didn't know. But if you're a big fan of like I said, like the Authenticity Project, which I think this book is very kind of like very much in the genre of, or Alan Bennett's The Uncommon Reader, I think that this book has a lot for you. Sara Nisha Adams has published another book, The Twilight Garden. This book was up for the Goodreads Choice Award for fiction. So clearly a lot of people did enjoy it. Um, so I don't feel super bad about recommending it. Like I wasn't the only one. But again, I just don't think that it really, really stuck the landing and did everything that the author wanted to do. But that's not to say that I wouldn't pick up their next work, because I think that there's parts in it that were really good. So yeah, it's always, other than Virginia, who clearly does all of her homework before the episode, it's really tough sometimes knowing like the brief summary of things that you're like, oh, this might appeal to me, and then not quite knowing if it's going to like achieve all of the things that it set out to do. So yeah. But yeah, thank you, Sadie, for kind of like knocking this one off my list. I feel very virtuous right now.
You're welcome, Corinne. You're very welcome. So, okay, Corinne was a yeah. I was a yes. I think I would definitely recommend it to a certain reader for mine, definitely. Virginia, are you a yes recommendation for yours?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I wasn't even into Like I was thinking, like I'm not really into thriller or anything like that these days, but that kept me going. Like I was surprised how I just like flipping through these pages, like, and it just went by. So yeah, so absolutely.
There we go. So yeah, you never know what those books on your TBR, your most anticipated lists, are going to be like, especially when you revisit them years later. So for that, on that note, listeners, we are going to say goodbye. Let us know if you have a TBR. If you're watching on Facebook, you can always let us know in the comments. We're very interested to know how you keep track of your books and if you follow your lists. And so until next time, we will see you then and have a very good week. Bye, everyone.